It's 7 p.m., April 27th, and I'm calling to order a meeting of the St. Cloud District 742 School Board. Our mission is to create a safe and caring climate and culture in which we prepare, engage, educate, empower, and inspire all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today and tomorrow's society. Mr. Mose, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Mose, could you call roll?
Shannon Hawes.
Here.
Jeff Polreis.
Here.
Jerry Von Korf.
Here.
Al Dahlgren.
Here.
Bruce Mose here. Monica Segura-Schwartz.
Here.
And Bruce Henches.
Here.
Let the record show also that Superintendent Willie Jett, Assistant Superintendent Marcia Beisch, Director of Student Services, and a lot of things there, Carol Potter, and Executive Director Joni Olson, Strategic Alignment and Achievement, Gary Ganji, and Tracy Bowe, and our new Executive Director of Business Services, Amy Skellerud. Did I get that right? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The first item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board routinely adopts without debate. Any single member of the board may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. The full text of items can be found at the end of the agenda. In tonight's consent agenda, we have item A, approval of tonight's agenda. Item B, approval of the minutes for the meetings of March 23rd and April 12th. C, the monthly treasurer's report for March 2017. D, the approval of payment of bills and other financial transactions in the grand total amount of $3,452,852.44. E, acceptance of the monthly financial report. F, approval of personnel and staff changes. G, acceptance of grant awards and donations. H, call for bids, Quarry View Education Center, irrigation. I, NJPA contract, floor replacement in the lower gym at North Junior High. J, NJPA contract, attenuating surfaces for playgrounds at Clearview and Talahi. K, NJPA contract for Apollo High School football and track lighting. L, quarterly expenditures for board members from January 1st through March 31st. M, change order for Apollo High School infrastructure upgrades totaling minus $1,581,065. And N, call for bids, Quarry View Education Center, HVAC controls. I've been asked by Mr. Polreis to remove item M, the change order for Apollo High School infrastructure upgrades totaling minus $1,581,065, so we'll remove that. And I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through N without item M.
I move.
Monica moves.
I'll second it, Al.
Seconded by Jeff. Any discussion on the consent agenda? If not, Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Monica Segura-Schwartz.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf.
Yes.
Jeff Polreis.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Then we'll move to item M, change order for Apollo High School infrastructure upgrades totaling minus $1,581,065. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I will move approval of letter M.
And a second? Jerry?
I'll second it. This is about the largest
Okay.
negative change order I've seen in a long, long time.
And Mr. Polreis, any discussion?
Yeah, I just want some simple clarification. It was for Section C of Apollo High School, credit for a bathroom, and something else on the notes? that cost will come back to us at a later date when we decide to do the Section C?
If Section C is decided to be done in conjunction with some sort of referendum, it would come back. Otherwise, that section of the building wouldn't be done within the scope of this project, and that is the majority of the change order, is the Section C.
And in the meantime, any parts, systems we put in will be compatible 2,
Correct.
3, 4, 5 years down the road?
Yep.
Okay. All right, that was it.
Any other questions? If there's no further discussion, Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Jeff Pulleries,
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Al Dahlgren.
Yes. Next, we move to the information items. Item A in information items is the McKinley-ALC presentation. Principal Al Johnson. Welcome, Al. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Great name, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to come tell you about McKinley. Super excited, super excited. We are there. We're gonna go here. McKinley, this is my third school year at McKinley. And what let me restate that. What we have really tried to do at McKinley is embrace this district's mission. Realizing that we weren't there 3 years ago. There were some items on there that I really couldn't say with fidelity. We were really there. We wanted to get there. We were striving to get there, but there were some obstacles. Today, I can say, man, we were real close. We're very close. My staff at McKinley are fantastic, doing tremendous work, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. If you could take a moment, though, please just watch this short video. What we try to do here at McKinley is help students that are behind in credits, possibly, help them accelerate their learning so they can graduate on time. That's our number one goals. Their other goal is, if at any point a child has gone through any sort of trauma in their life, and that could be a variety of things, that trauma has caused them to want to learn in a smaller learning environment. That has nothing to do with the amount of rigor that we're going to give to your child. McKinley, again, is the place. We've got courses and flexibility in our scheduling to where students can come to school for 4.5 hours up to 8 hours a day. That's what we can do here.
The students at McKinley have many opportunities to volunteer in the community and do service learning projects. We work with many different organizations in the community, such as Catholic Charities, the VA, different schools in the community. They have the opportunity to build their resume and get some community engagement.
Here at McKinley, we have some Focus Fridays where we try to work on some community skills with our students. We also have programs called iPods. iPods is a program that we use to deliver social skills to our students and also to develop rapport with one another. And it kind of gives our school a community sense.
We're here to support them. We're here to help them understand and develop their potential. We're here to provide as many successful experiences as we can. We're here to give them a place where they can feel safe. We're here to give them a place where there's some stability.
FOCUS stands for Fostering Opportunities for Character Development, Unity, and Success. So we do have a curriculum that we work on social skills, soft skills, some career skills, and we build some leadership, team building, also do some assistance with their academics in their classes and help the students stay caught up and where they need to be able to graduate on time.
The teachers are really great and supportive. It's a great community of people to work with for school. You're in small groups, so you always can get the one-on-one help you need.
Basketball program, very positive for our boys. A lot of kids are not going to school because they have basketball to look forward to. Within the basketball program, we have a boys group where we allow our boys to come in and talk about stuff that bothers them, stuff that's going on in their daily life.
It's a great place to be. A lot of kids really like to come into the gym, and it's a lot of exciting stuff. We got lots of music and everything, and the kids for classes that they need to blow off some steam, they love doing it in the gym because it clears their mind and gets them back to the class.
When we're not working out of the traditional curriculum, we're doing a lot of hands-on stuff. This week we're exploring 1,000,000. We wanted to know if 1,000,000 of our textbooks would fit in our classroom, so we started out by guessing and documented that.
We feel we are meeting these needs, or meeting these needs. We're creating a learning environment that the students know that they're cared for and loved, and I want to use the word love, okay? We care internally, we make it a heart thing with our kids. Once we get here, we build on self-esteem by adding rigorous curriculum, showing them their successes as they go along to get them to self-actualization.
She's excelling in the classes. They do a real good job of one-on-one and making sure that they get their work done and the help that they need. I really appreciate what McKinley High School does for my daughter.
McKinley proud. McKinley proud.
McKinley proud.
McKinley proud.
McKinley proud, baby.
McKinley proud.
McKinley proud.
Wow, what a cool school. I'm going to ask you to go with me. I'm going to give you some information you may have had before, but I just want to remind us of some things, and this will help you to hopefully understand what we try to do at McKinley and why we're there. 1970, September the 7th was my first day of kindergarten. My mom got me these 64-pack of Crayola crayons, and what's it say, with the built-in sharpener. It's the only one to have. What a fabulous memory of kindergarten, and that's how I started my education. That very night, right next door, an explosion. Huge explosion, blew up almost half of our house. I'll never forget that day. Those two things, fantastic crayons, and then something really, really traumatic. I was 5 years old. What happens to a lot of kids, unfortunately, is they go through periods of trauma. Okay? Most kids once or twice early on, and that's about it. But what I'm finding is a number of McKinley students, they're experiencing complex post-traumatic stress disorder, meaning that it's continual. It's going up and down, and that's their life. And it has an effect on their learning. Sometimes they have no hope, sometimes. What we look to do at McKinley is to provide hope. We recognize that some students may come to us with some trauma, so we look to address that, to address the whole child. We've made a commitment. These acts of trauma can be considered risk factors. Risk factors get in the way of students' education. And there's many studies on this. And we're able at our school to name them. What are the risk factors that can come into our building that can prevent students from learning? Because make no mistake, any student on any given day can come into any of our buildings with something blocking them from learning or risk that's blocking them from learning. Our job as educators is to find out what that is, work with the student and the family to help them overcome it. We have decided at McKinley that not again in our watch will we be a barrier for someone to graduate. I honor Allie Campbell. I honor her. We hold ourselves accountable because this young lady was a signature away from graduating. And that could have gotten out of a situation. But she has had experienced in her life some things that most kids should not have had to experience. Our job as educators and as a school district, I pray, is to put systems, policies, and things in place to help the Allie Campbells of the world. Maslow's hierarchy of needs tells us this story. If we're not meeting the needs at the bottom echelon of this pyramid, it's very difficult to ask a kid to be super creative and reach self-actualization. So at McKinley, we've got a lot of new initiatives. We have to-go breakfast at the very beginning of the day. We meet the kids right there as they come in. We want to make sure that all of our kids have something in their stomachs if they're hungry. Good water. A restful, calm environment for our students. There are the pieces making sure that McKinley is a safe place to be. And thank you, board, for a lot of the good work that you've done to help McKinley achieve some of these goals as far as safety is concerned. Those are some of the basic things that we have to do, and it's in our mission statement, right? McKinley's there now. We are really getting good at building strong, loving relationships with our students, and that's where we want to be. Students that have experienced trauma, they may have missed a lot of that stuff. When they come to McKinley, our staff are specialists designed and skilled at meeting those needs. We serve all students at McKinley. These are our demographics. 50% of our students are white students from our communities and around. I'll show you some numbers on how we are pulling students from outside of our school district. And of all needs, EL, special education, free and reduced lunch, and homeless. Risk factor for schools. These are some things that I've noticed in the past that we've addressed at McKinley. Low academic expectation and performance, lack of staff collaboration, and my staff, our staff, they are blended together. They work very, very well together. But if that were not happening, that's a risk factor for a child. Low commitment, teacher, administrator. If I'm not buying in, if I'm not giving my full 100% effort, that could hurt my students. The physical structure of the building is a risk factor in a school. If I'm not proud to go there, okay? If I can't say this is my place where I go to school, if it's falling apart, that hurts children. Having a poor school image. People saying, I don't want to go there because of what they think it represents is a risk factor. And then when we don't trust one another. And I apologize, my intent is not to offend anyone. But when I came to McKinley 3 years ago, I did not like the way it looked. It physically made me uncomfortable. And if I'm feeling that way, what about my kids? You all did the children of this St. Cloud area and any kid that comes to McKinley a great service when you invested in them. That's a high school campus of an alternative high school. Absolutely. Now it looks the part. That's technical change. But that's a fantastic start. A new secured entrance. Students noticed that day one and they were like, wow, this is my school. Staff feels safer. We're able to control the flow of students in and out of the building and adults in and out of the building. We need to be able to do that. Brand new office. The culture in my office is fantastic. A new computer lab. The issue with the achievement gap is there's lack of opportunities. Now we're giving our students more opportunities and more educational opportunities at McKinley. These are protective factors. Protective factors that may seem, they're the counterbalances to the risk factors. And if you know anything about the adverse childhood experiences, these are the counterbalances to ACEs. Caring adults. I've got a wonderful new assistant principal, Mr. Robert Murray. He's going to be mad because that's not the picture he wants up there. And he's sitting right here. But let me tell you, when you have caring adults in the building, again, it makes the world of difference. Caring adults that will hold students accountable for what they have done and where they need to go at all costs. Hallie Miller, our new behavior resource specialist. Last year, she was our SRO. What does it say about this district that she left Wake Park Police Department to come work for our district, to work with our kids? And how do you think the kids that were here last year feel knowing that she's there for them? These are the numbers of our building. We've got a number of programs at McKinley. Our SHAP program is our senior high school alternative program, 184 students. Our PACE program, which is independent study, 214 students. And our afternoon independent study program right now has 19 students. We are also pulling from outside of the district. In our day programs, we have a total of 43 students. Where the additional learning comes in is when we were given the opportunity to expand our learning day at McKinley. So now students can come 4 days a week from 8:30 a.m. till 6 p.m. So they can, if need be, they can work a full-time job and still come to school if they're supporting their family or supporting themselves. 19 students in our evening school, 223 students in our night school. That's a lot of kids. And then from there, 12 students that are outside of our district. Summer school, we pull in this past summer 636 students, which means that McKinley is about the same size as Tech and Apollo with 1,200, nearly 1,300 students that we service in one school year. You won't see that on MDE's website when you look at our student numbers, but those are the actual numbers as of 2 days ago. New policies at McKinley are helping our students feel safe. Our no cell phone policy. Here's the reason. We know drama happens in a split second on a cell phone. It gets into the way of learning during the day. And I've seen tragedy because of cell phones. We've made a commitment at McKinley that not in our building, not in our space. For 4.5 hours or for 5 hours, you can be without your cell phone because you're coming here to be educated. We had a couple kicks and screams and moans at the beginning of the school year, just a couple. What we got more now, students and teachers saying, thank you for having that policy because as a student, I'm more engaged. I know I wasn't paying attention before. Teachers saying, I can see a difference. My students are more engaged and I'm not fighting that battle. That is a good thing. Now, I don't know how you do that at Tech and Apollo with 1,200 students, but I know how I can do it with 600, 400, 500 students in my building. McKinley Recovery School, another educational opportunity for our kids, not just in St. Cloud, but in surrounding areas. We are now one of 6 recovery schools in the state of Minnesota. We were not serving a population of students. Students that, because of trauma, have resorted to self-medication and have become addicted. When that happens, they will more likely have to go into treatment. When they go into treatment at Recovery Plus or Clara's House, when they go into treatment, when they come back out, the #1 risk factor for them using again was school. We now can put them into a chemical-free learning environment where teachers now rotate through the classroom old school style. They do not mix with the rest of the students, which is fine. It helps them maintain sobriety. We've had 10 total students this school year. Right now we have 4 current students, and we've had 1 graduate from our recovery school. Adaptive change. Our students now are having a positive self-identity of being associated with our building. Staff empowerment. Let me restate that. Most, if not all, of the changes, positive changes at McKinley has been a collaboration and staff feeling that they can say, hey, Mr. Johnson, this is something that we need to do to better our school, to help our kids. And you can see the outcomes. Positive school culture. Come visit our school. Come take a walk around. You get your own impression of what it feels like at McKinley. And a positive public image. We're looking and trying very hard to be good neighbors so that someone that lives near McKinley can be proud of the building that sits there, knowing that we're in there doing our best to be a good neighbor to them. creating opportunities for our students now to be out and affect our world. These pro-social involvement. We have a student on the site council. We've sent students to the legislature, our MAP stars. Right now, they're competing down in Minneapolis or down in Bloomington. At this competition, of the 9 teams, 9 of them made it to the semifinals. 6 of them made it to the finals. They're doing fantastic. We sent a number of students, 5 students, to the Holocaust Museum. These are opportunities that are expanding these young people's minds. They are going to come back, and they have come back, and they're on fire. They want to do more. The more opportunities you give someone, the more experiences you give them, their trajectory goes here, towards success. Student mentoring. We believe in teaching our children at McKinley. Now, these young men happen to look just like me. And so myself, Mr. Murray, and the other adults in our building, we make sure that they know that they're loved, they're cared for, and that we have very high expectations of them, academically and socially. Some of the results. Notice the behavior counts trending down dramatically. The top one is the referrals, 451 referrals when I came to McKinley, down to 142. That's year to date. Numbers of out-of-school suspensions from 69 to 26. It's all about the relationships that we're building with our students in the building. Because if they know I care about them, okay, they're caring about me. We're not trying to harm one another. Okay? We're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we're teaching. We only have 1 student in our building that has more than 11 referrals. When I came in, we had 9. It's difficult to manage 9 students with 11 behavior referrals because you're all over the place. We're at a place now, and here's the thing, we're not really having to manage behavior at McKinley. What we can do now is we can focus on education because we're taking that off the table. Okay, this is me just being a little, I guess I like to see myself in pictures. We have had 80 graduates to date. 80. A number of students from 2017 that were on track and graduated a little bit early. And we've had some 2016 and some 2015 graduates. And I love it because they continue to work hard in our building to do what they have to do. And the 2 pictures there's 2 new mothers. What a fantastic way to start their life. And we're collecting hardware. Okay? It's top down. Okay? Ms. Chris Scott in our kitchen, fantastic, her and her staff. With this health award, it really helps continue to validate the work that's happening at McKinley. And if she sees this picture, and I hope she's already told her husband that this is my new girlfriend, 85 years young. You talk about a positive school image. She saw the article that was in the paper. She said she read it, Mr. Johnson, I've read it 3 or 4 times. I want to come and do something in your building. She wants to partner with us, and she lives in our community and has for years. There's been a change in Wake Park. What does tomorrow hold? And I tell my kids this, the sky is the limit. Don't listen to people outside of these walls if they're giving you something negative. Believe you can do it. Why we do what we do? Like these 2 young men. They were at McKinley last year. They came back and said thank you. They're proud to be McKinley Panthers. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Jeff.
Principal Johnson, have you ever heard of whole brain training?
Whole brain training?
Yeah. It's a spin-off from ACEs.
I have not.
Very, very good stuff. I was just at a state training for it today. I don't know if you can just interject curriculum like that, but if you want, I would get you 10 of the textbooks. If you want it, or take a peek and see if it's worthwhile. Spread it around. It's fantastic, fantastic stuff. Just research it for me if you would, please. And then you already touched on my other stuff with the ACEs. Your staff was fully aware of that, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then just a personal note, when you were playing ping pong, you spun the ball in your hand. Got that. I'll play you sometime. Thank you.
You're welcome. In response to the curriculum, the beautiful thing about McKinley is that we're looking for best practices no matter where they come from if it's going to help our students. So I'll absolutely take those 10 books.
Shannon.
I don't have a question. I just want to tell you I'm very touched by your passion and your commitment. And we're very fortunate to have you. Thank you.
Monica.
I have two questions. The first question is, one time long ago, a wise man told me that the kids behave at school as a reflect of how they react to their community around them. And I wanted to ask you about hearing this statement and telling us what do you think our community should be doing better for our kids?
Okay. When I look at some of my McKinley students, this is personal. Let me make one quick statement. I do nothing in isolation by myself at McKinley. I've got a fantastic staff that does the work. They follow a vision. In our community, there's two pieces. When students come out of the community to McKinley, we give them a community at McKinley. We try to build one for them there that they will learn on and take back to their homes if it's not a productive community. Outside of McKinley, what I would ask for is please, let's educate people on the work. Let's educate our community about trauma, what it looks like. Let's educate our community about what risk and protective factors are. Because some moms and dads may not have been taught. They may not know it's not okay to do certain things in front of a child. Because that's how they were taught. Okay? I'm not faulting anyone, but it is about education. And so we being education leaders, we need to be out in our communities having these little seminars about ACEs, about the whole brain. We should be having those. And then showing our families what we're doing, what it does to the brain, how it changes it. Okay? And then how they can partner with the schools if they don't have the skills to get there to help their kid.
And my second question is that about how have you been working in the school, and I see great changes that you have been doing. We just had a couple of days ago the review of our strategic planning, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about what has the strategic planning of the district has done for you in your direction about the school.
Well, you know, the strategic plan of the district has allowed me to look at that and say, if this is where the district wants to go, allow me to do this, because it'll get us there. It's been freeing.
Well, Mr. Johnson, I have a question too, but my question comes out of a couple of reflections, and I'm just going to share those reflections with you, if I may, please. I was listening carefully when you were talking about facility and relationships and how those are vital to the mission and the accomplishments, achievements of students at McKinley. Also, in terms of your pro-social involvement, I think I saw that on exhibit on Tuesday in a 9-hour strategic planning session. There was a young woman, one of your students from McKinley, who was there with other students. And this person was about the most confident, composed, convincing, articulate person that I've seen, maybe ever. It just caught me, not by surprise, but it just took my breath away. And so if she's coming from McKinley, some of what she had there on display that day was incubated, planted and incubated at McKinley, I'm sure. And so that's going to be part of my question. The second reflection I want to make is it's kind of a reflection that's been in my life as an educator that I've always reminded myself, and I'm not the only person that, when I have conversations with people in education that talk about this, but we almost always agree that education is a very noble calling. And we almost always agree that it's a very, very satisfying career. And we almost always agree that it's very personally enriching and meaningful. So with those reflections, if I may, please, I'm just going to ask a question that, and I bet if I worked at this question, I would get it even, it would be better posed to you, but I'm just going to put it out there. What's at the core of Al Johnson? What's the core? What is the driving that motor? And I bet I could ask the same question of Robert, but I'm just going to ask you that question. Tell me what's going on there with you, please.
Okay. So what's at my core? I'm going to use I then. I'm really selfish. I'm really selfish. I want to change the world. I truly mean that. One child at a time. Frustrated with another school district that I grew up in because it let me fly under the radar and fall through the cracks. Do not want to see that happen again. If Al Johnson can be a principal in his third school year in St. Cloud, any student coming through our system right now can do it also. And I don't want to stop pushing until there's more Al Johnsons. Underserved, overlooked, hurting child. We gotta love them up. We gotta see them, we gotta look for them. They're in our classrooms, they're sitting in our chairs. Some of them look like me, some of them look just like you. And you'll never know it. And the time is now. We don't have time to mess around. I do push. I know I pushed at the district. I know I beg Amy Scalaroot for money. Please give me a little more money. I know I'm over my staffing. It's not for me. It's a heart thing, Mr. Moses. It's a heart thing. And I love these children. I do.
That's great. Appreciate that answer. That was a tough question, and to me, you just hit it out of the ballpark. Thank you for sharing that. I'm too old now, but I'd like to come and interview to be a teacher at your building. I have a license, but I'm supposed to be retired. But
can you teach science?
Science, I can do that. I can do that.
Hope.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great presentation. A few years ago, I got trained to do volunteer work for the Children's Law Center, and they represent foster children. That is, we represent foster children who are in their teenage years and are struggling with the court system, mostly not because of them, but because of they get bounced around from place to place. And I had a client who bounced her way through Apollo and through the ALC, and while she was there, somebody diagnosed her with oppositional defiance disorder. because she'd been through, if I told her life story, and that would take, an hour, but talk about moving from place to place, being abandoned by your parents, having to take care of your children, your siblings, lasting for 3 months at one foster home, moving some other place, and so on and so forth. In the event, when I came to know her and work with her, she had been transferred out of our school district and out to a school district, mostly white, rural, western Stearns County, and she was turning her life around, and but still facing lots of obstacles. And I said to her, "What turned your life around?" And she said, "They put me in a high school where the teachers, the counselors, the principals treat you like family. And no matter what I did, they invested in me. And I began to believe in myself. And she started taking advanced courses, and they'd put her in special education, and she went down and signed out of special education for oppositional defiance disorder, and she said, treat me like everybody else. And she's now graduated from me, and she's over at St.Cloud State University, which is tremendously unusual for these kids that have been through the foster care system, graduating in 3 years. And so this is by way of endorsement of your idea that kids need adults who care for them in an environment that's a substitute family, that the people that the adults and the kids that they're with are like family. And so what you said and the way you described it was certainly inspirational to me.
Jeff.
Principal Johnson, I just got a couple other things. Thank you for giving me the tour when it was under construction. Can you please tell us about your garden? And am I invited to the cookout this summer? You do have an annual get-together, right? Can you tell us about those?
Absolutely. Right now we have about 115 tulips coming up in our Peace Garden. So it's going to be beautiful. The snow today is not helping, it's kind of prolonging them coming up. But give us a few weeks and drive by McKinley on the east side of the building, and it's going to be absolutely beautiful. Our flowering crab has a ton of blooms on it. And here's the thing, it is for our community. We made very sure that when we planted that flowering crab right in the middle, that we dedicated it to a police officer from Waite Park that had passed away. Every plant there is dedicated to either a staff member or a community member that has lost someone. It is to bring peace, absolutely. And our neighbors are absolutely enjoying that. When we have our community barbecue, you're all invited. Fantastic food and fun is had by everyone. And that will be probably the second week of September, second or third week of September.
Bruce Sanchez.
Thank you for your presentation, Principal Johnson. When Board Member Mose asked you the question about what is at your core, I felt like I wanted to raise my hand and try to answer it based on what I've seen from you and what I've heard tonight. But clearly you're a man with a great passion for public education, but someone who believes that kids want to learn, that all kids want to learn, and that all kids can learn if we can create an environment for them that is supportive of them. And so you design, and your staff design an educational environment that addresses their risk factors, or the risk factors of kids, and develops these protective factors. that allows them to learn. And to me, that's just such a great testament to what you're accomplishing at McKinley, and what I hope really all of our principals and school leaders are trying to do. It's inspiring to hear that kind of vision for what kids can accomplish, even kids who have faced a lot of difficulty in their life. So thank you for the job that you and your staff are doing there.
So before Willie, I'll say a couple things here. I think Willie would be disappointed if I didn't say this one. A few weeks ago, it was my father passed away a few weeks ago, and I was given the opportunity to give a memorial speech or a memorial at his funeral. And in that memorial, my dad was a teacher for many, many, many years, and then followed with a long, long retirement, which was awesome. But I brought up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just as you did there, and I basically said the same thing. And I was relating it to the fact that with my parents and with my mom and my dad, as I grew up as a child, the bottom of the pyramid I never had to think about. I always felt safe. I was always taken care of. I didn't have a worry in the world. All I had to do was live in the top of the pyramid, and to me it was just unthinkable that every kid didn't live that way. And as I've grown, I've seen that there are a lot of kids who do experience a lot of trauma. And in fact, I think it's the majority of kids experience some forms of trauma in their childhood that affect them and their ability to learn. And in my odd way, I said that every week I read the mission statement of the school district before our school board meetings, and so I read it at the funeral, and then I said, now I'm going to rewrite that for you using Maslow's hierarchy. And it went something like, our mission is to create a safe and caring climate and culture in which, for a period of time each day, the children that we serve can live in the top of the pyramid and experience their lives in a way in which they can learn and become better people before we send them back home for the evening and they have to experience that trauma all over again. And so I was just saying, it's amazing. My dad chose a career in which that is really, you hit the nail on the head when you said that. That's what you do. And I just know from working with you in the past and your personality and your leadership that you are a tremendous person to be chosen to work in this school, which really has some of the more, I shouldn't say difficult's a bad choice of words, but it's the more needy subset of children who need even more of that. And it's just amazing to watch how you work. So, great job.
I'm going to listen to that back, and I'm going to steal that.
And Chair Dahlgren, I was there that afternoon when you spoke at your father's funeral, and when Al was getting ready to do his presentation, I remember looking at that triangle, that Maslow's, and I remember thinking of things that you had said, and during that moment when he was presenting it here, I'm glad that you brought that up because I recognized it, and now to be able to see that you recognize that he's saying the exact same thing. Principal Johnson, and so I like that because I like the fact that everybody here said Principal Johnson. They didn't say Al. Okay. I know Al, but I love the fact that everybody said Principal Johnson. And so I believe we're fortunate to be able to call Principal Johnson and Principal Murray ours. Okay. It's completely obvious that their passion, their vision, it's contagious. The kids are benefiting, but more importantly, our community is benefiting. And so from me to you, I would like to say thank you for making us look good but personally, thank you for making me look good. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go, boss.
Next on the agenda is a summary of the April work session and preview of the May work session. Marcia Beisch.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, and members of the board. At the April work session, the new high school update was the first item on the agenda. David Leopold, who, as we know, is the architect with IIW Minnesota, presented the current project status following the environmental assessment worksheet comment period. And he stated that in addition to its prime location and access for residents, the site chosen for the new high school, as we know, offers wonderful opportunities for students, including the natural features of the wetlands, the trout stream, the adjacent city park, and the woodlands. These all offer educational opportunities for teaching and learning at this site. Mr. Leopold emphasized the importance of preserving these features and described the challenges of that process, highlighting the environmental assessment worksheet required by and submitted to the state. The design team met recently to review the comments that were received on the EIW by the Department of the Army Corps of Engineers, the DNR, and the MPCA, and the Minnesota Historical Society. The regulatory agencies, recognizing the significance of this project, are working in cooperation with the district to achieve the permits necessary for construction to start on the site with the completion goal of fall 2019. And Mr. Leopold did state that currently the project is on schedule. The second item on the agenda was the new high school naming committee recommendations. Joni Olson, Executive Director of Student Achievement and Strategic Alignment, who was the facilitator of the naming committee for the new high school, shared that the committee had completed its work. She discussed the process, which was guided by the Board Policy 899. The committee reviewed a series of names that were suggested by members for their sense of tradition and geographic or historical significance. The list was narrowed to 5. Committee members John Scherenbrock and Jim Dahl presented the following names that were arrived at by consensus. St. Cloud Tech High School, to be known as Tech High School. St. Cloud Technical High School, to be known as Technical High School. St. Cloud Granite Creek High School, to be known as Granite Creek High School. St. Cloud Technological High School, to be known as Technological High School. St. Cloud Nina Creek High School, to be known as Nina Creek High School. They noted that the majority of the votes would keep the tradition and remain with the name Tech High School. So that name, by consensus, was brought to the board, and I believe which will be voted on in final tonight. The last item on the agenda was the Section 100 board policies and the proposed new policy for 421. Joni Olson presented and reviewed board policy updates for the Section 100s. That was the first reading. Tonight will be the second reading. It was noted that MSBA Model Policy 103 is not being recommended for adoption because it correlates with the district's recently revised board policy 499. Tracy Flynn Bowl reviewed a proposed new board policy 421, which is gifts to employees and school board members. And board members asked that that proposed policy be reviewed by the superintendent's cabinet and board development policy and governance committee. That's the end of the review of the work session for April. May topics for the work session include, again, the new high school update. Section 900 policies will be reviewed with the board, and there will be a couple revised board policies that will also be brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Next, we have an action item. It is the curriculum resource adoption. Karen Bankston, Science Coordinator.
Board Chair Dahlgren, school board members, Superintendent Jett, and executive directors, thank you for your time this evening. I am here to present information about the grade 9 and 10 science pilot as a science curriculum coordinator. As a reminder, for those of you who have been here for the other aspects of the science program, the 9th and 10th grade pilots have followed middle school and some of the elementary work that we've done in previous years, so it isn't standing alone on its own. The 9th and 10th grade science pilot were the process started last summer when we brought together a core group of teachers in 9th and 10th grade to look at a variety of resources using the district checklist for looking at curriculum. And they came down to two core pieces from McGraw-Hill, Glencoe, and Pearson for biology and physical science. Biology is the 10th grade curriculum and physical science is the 9th grade. When we started, we had 7 teachers volunteering from Tech and Apollo high schools. And during this last school year, they worked together as teams to coordinate on science units from each of the publishers' resources. The publishers were kind enough from both companies to include all teacher and student editions for the classes that we're piloting, as well as online access for teachers and students. The publishers both provided trainers in August, November, and February to meet with all of the pilot teachers to go through any questions and to do deeper looks at what was all available. The pilot teachers themselves during these team coordination times aligned the curriculum that they were working on to Minnesota benchmarks. They mapped out some of the pieces that they would be using in the two resources as part of the pilot, and then just collaborating on aspects that they could use. This particular pilot was put together a little differently than the math and science pilots that I've done for the district in the past, in that they decided as teams to at both buildings do the same units from the same resources. In the past, they would one building would use one resource and one would use the other, and then they would switch. But because of the nature of how units are taught in the sciences and the way that the actual resources aligned, they decided to do it by unit at both buildings. The picture on the corner of the slide is some of the mapping that they've done with the dates and some of the resources that were used, etc. The pilot teachers did ongoing electronic reflections and debriefing throughout the time from August to February, looking at student performance and understanding, really looking at the online resources on how consistent and reliable they were, the actual usefulness, how much they could use the resources for both their planning, remediation, extensions, formative and summative assessments, etc. And then how the content itself was presented to the students, both for teacher tools and for student tools. The state benchmark on alignment was also an issue. As many of you know, Minnesota is not a large enough state that publishers consider publishing resources specifically for state benchmarks. So how was that work done, or how well did the resources themselves meet the standards that the state is requiring students to know? The student resource comparisons were done by survey in February. The teachers even made comments on how serious the students took the process of taking the Google survey that I put out, and that's the picture on the slide there, is actually taking a look at the resources. We had some reports of student teams sitting together looking through the books and comparing before making answers on their survey. And then we did a debriefing and recommendation at the end of trimester 2 on February 27th. The debriefing process itself was comparing the two resources. We sat down in teams and did strengths, weaknesses, and implementation discussions on, okay, what if this is the resource that we go for and it is a weakness, how can we actually implement with that weakness? Are there ways that we can adjust or add or address these things? They also went through the student survey response analysis, which is always interesting when there's open-ended questions with students about the resources, and actually looking at how they perceived the two resources for ease of use, the engagement factor, how is the textbook organized for them, how did they interact with them visually and for reading. And then the actual teacher reflections were analyzed during that meeting, having both pre, during, and post teaching of unit discussions, and then the teacher prep itself. How was it to work with the resources? How was it to work with students in their engagement and assessment? So just some highlights from the student surveys themselves. There were 320 students that took the survey, and as you can see, the Glencoe product had 52% that they preferred, a little over 52% that preferred Glencoe, and then 47% preferred Pearson. And then on the Likert scale that I gave throughout the surveys, 1 was considered a negative, all the way up to 5 as a positive. And across the surveys, Glencoe on average scored 4, and Pearson scored a 3.63. So the discussion was really, these are not strikingly different, and teachers came to the conclusion, though, that because they did such a thorough job last summer in the process of choosing the two resources to pilot, that they should be fairly close in that they wanted those two as options. They also discussed the comments. Just as a side note, they really liked the parrot on the Pearson cover, and I think maybe the zebra wasn't as popular because the old textbook had a zebra on it, so that was some of the comments. But there were some really heartfelt discussion about students saying certain aspects online were really useful, the way that the information was presented in how they were organized and described in some of the texts was really important to the students. So all of that was considered. Then in the teacher reflection and analysis, the McGraw-Hill resources, the strengths were really focused in on the variety of engaging activities. The teacher portal online in particular was very useful. The ease of use for both text and online and in combination was a strength. The organization of the content fit the coursework very well, and the Learn Smart tool became a topic of discussion, which is fairly new with McGraw-Hill as a publisher. It's an individualized tool that helps students process the resources that are there and support them. It'll go so far as to say, wait a minute, we shouldn't do any more assessment right now. You need to go back and do some more learning before we continue. The weaknesses, they really wanted to examine the book assessments more closely to look at the rigor of the actual book assignments. And then the lab experiences, they felt that they could enhance those quite a bit. For Pearson, the strengths were definitely the visual appearance, the organization within the units. Pearson did a very nice job within the chapters to organize it in a way that built fairly quickly and thoroughly. And then the video aspect that Pearson provided, although we found out very quickly that you can also get them free on YouTube. So that was a piece that was part of the research. The weaknesses, the online platforms was a definite hindrance, especially since the two resources were on two different platforms. So we couldn't do common training for the two grade levels, either student-wise or teacher-wise. The reading level was an issue, and student access. We had some students that we worked with from August all the way through January trying to get them online for student access. The organization of the content overall throughout the text did not fit the way that the classes have been taught in the past and the way that the teachers felt built the content understanding, so that was an issue as well. Then we moved to, at this same meeting, we moved to what's I've come to call the weighted vote, and it has worked very well in the past, where since we have two choices, each teacher in the pilot, and by the way, we went from 7 teachers down to 5 due to things that happened throughout the year, although those 2 teachers were also consulted because they did know the resources fairly well. But the 5 that did end the pilot were part of the weighted vote. They were each given 2 points, which they could divide between the 2 resources. So for instance, in the examples, teacher X liked both resources, but preferred A just a slight bit more. So they voted 1.1 for resource A and 0.9 for B for a total of 2. I did ask teachers, please keep it to the 10th. It's a lot easier to calculate. Teacher Y, on the other hand, for this particular example, did not like resource A and decided to put all of the points towards resource B for, again, a total of 2. This process includes all pilot participants, and so you know, in the past, we've had situations where the nuance of how they can vote, for instance, if we had a teacher join in a pilot late for whatever reason, they could still get some points for the work that they did on there and still have a voice while bringing everything to a final conclusion. So it wasn't majority vote, it was weighted, so they could talk about nuance on what they preferred. So using a Google form, each of the pilot teachers put in a point value, and also indicated their agreement to support consensus of the group. So like I would tell them that they do not have to be cheerleaders for the particular book that the resource was, but they understood and would support that the process was fair and logical, and they all agreed with the way that the selection process was done. Just to let you know that this is a highly stressful process for teachers because they take it very, very seriously. And so before the points were tallied, there was a lot of discussions of what if. For instance, what if they tie? And we decided that we would, address that. Well, we would talk through it again and do another vote and see if we can't come to consensus. And when we actually did do the vote, it was striking in that McGraw-Hill Glencoe resources received 7.15% or points in the weighted vote, and then Pearson received 2.85, with all of the teachers voting the majority of their points towards McGraw-Hill. So it was very much a relief, and it was really striking to the teachers afterwards that, yes, I can see why that would have happened. So that was very confirming. When we also talked to the 2 teachers that were initially part of the pilot and then the vertical teams afterwards, they were also in support of it from what they had seen of the resources. So the pilot team put together the recommendation that they would recommend to the school board to implement McGraw-Hill's Glencoe science resources for grades 9 and 10 in District 742. And as you can see on the discussion action items, this was also then brought forth to the science BCRs, which across the district and secondary levels, both middle school and secondary, and the teaching and learning team, as well as the teaching and learn advisory committee, which really supported that as well when they got a chance to look at the textbooks. We even had one of the college professors say, from what I can see, this is a good quality resource. And so we bring forth that recommendation for adoption. Some of the pieces to be aware of for the science program that the professional development needs would be also something that we would like to bring forth. That initial implementation will take some work, as well as the online resource management and how to actually use it to the full potential that it's worth, and then ongoing support and development on making sure that we're meeting all of the Minnesota benchmarks. For the whole science program, we just want to make sure that to voice that there is work being done for AP biology resource needs as they're being under review as well. That's one area that has not been looked at yet. And then K-12 state benchmark alignment still needs to be done across the board, or it is in process across the board for meeting the resource needs, talking about K-5 integration with literacy and math so that they're supporting each other, and then the MCA preparation because of the grade banded tests in 5th, 8th, and high school tests, so all teachers understand where they contribute to those 3 tests throughout the student's science program career. Also on the science education arena, the national cross-cutting concepts and science and engineering practices are something that we're talking about, because it is nationally a piece that is best practice, and then common alignment and assessment, both vertically and across the buildings, are something that we're working on. And that's the presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you. I've seen, this is the second time I'm seeing this because I serve on the Curriculum Advisory Committee, but I recommended that we bring you forward to the Agenda Planning Committee because I felt it was important for the board to get a sense of the magnitude of work that goes on in making these changes. And sometimes we think we just throw a textbook in the hands of a teacher and then they teach away, but there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into helping teachers be effective and working with them to pick curriculum resources. And I've probably been in and on and off the Curriculum Advisory Committee since my 35-year-old kid was in elementary school, but I really do feel that what the team is doing now in terms of involving teachers and making, going through a process that listens to the experts in our district, that it's really, really improved. My question is, after the board, if it does, adopts this process, what work is involved, if any, in taking that new textbook and making teachers successful? I mean, is it as simple as just handing them a book and say, go for it, or what really goes on?
Not at all. There's quite a bit of work with the publishers for training, and they include that into the implementation purchase itself, including any vertical teamwork that needs to be done with 9th and 10th grade. And that would include things like how is the book put together for learning, as well as what online resources are available for assessment, remediation, extension, experiential learning, project-based learning, etc. And then also the work of trying to align with the Minnesota benchmarks and making sure that there aren't gaps in those. So for instance, we have a June curriculum work week where that'll be the initial mapping of it. Because it is so new for us, and that happens with implementation, takes about 3 to 5 years to really understand the extent of the implementation. But to really get that initial, okay, we're going to attempt to teach in this order, in these areas in the book and online. These are the resources that will meet the benchmark, the assessments that are available. These are the things that are not met with the resources, the new resources, and how are we going to accomplish meeting those learning goals as well. So there is quite a bit of work that way. And then also bringing on board the teachers that were not part of the pilot, and making sure that they understand the extent of what is available and having their voice involved as well. What is a convenience for us is that the 7th and 8th grade curriculum is also on the same platform, same publisher for connected.com. So the students understand, for the most part, how to get into the system and things like that. So that's a convenience for us. And then how to interact in those ways. And there's pedagogical pieces that I support, especially if a teacher is not used to using some of the online resources that have not been available with some of the older resources that we've used in the past.
Thank you.
Bruce.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move that the Board of Education accept the administration recommendation for the adoption of the Glencoe Physical Science Grade 9 and Glencoe Biology Grade 10 materials.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Monica. Bruce.
In the discussion on this motion, I'd like to just ask Dr. Bankston. I participated in these for all of my lifetime in profession, so I appreciate this. And I've taught out of this resource on a couple of, but a long time ago. This is an entirely different book and resource than I ever taught from, I'm certain. Just reflect briefly, though, on the alignment of these curriculums and the resources that you're getting with them on the availability and the inventory of our current lab materials. Science is not just textbook, and the lab experiences are vital, are they not?
Yes,
and
very much so.
This is just a curiosity question, and
Right,
you know,
right.
the alignment of our lab resources that we have to these adoptions.
Right, and as you noticed, that was one of the
Yeah.
concerns that the pilot teachers had, and I can see that being a piece that we will be able to use many of the lab equipment pieces that are available, as well as implementing some of the new experiences with those lab pieces. We have not had the chance to thoroughly go through every single piece because piloting is very specific to student-teacher interaction. So I cannot answer that, yes, we'll definitely need extra, or not extra, but other pieces to go with that. Although when teachers did those initial reviews and then looking through them in comparison, there was nothing that stood out as of yet that, oh my goodness, this whole section we can't do because of the equipment aspect. But definitely working with the teachers, because that was one of the initial questions was, do we need all this, any extra items? So as of right now, I am not aware of any, but we haven't, again, thoroughly gone through all of the pieces, especially to meet the gaps if there are.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bruce.
Mr. Chair and Dr. Bankston, obviously it's a very thorough process that you've gone through, and I totally support the recommendation, but I just wanted to ask the question, how do we get to these two curriculum products?
So the process that we went through is I did research with different publishers and things, asking other districts what they use, asking publishers that I knew of that, what do you have for 9th grade physical science, 10th grade biology, asking for samples. We had a publisher rep came in with a couple different pieces as well, actually several of them did. Looking online, what seems to be popular in Minnesota, what seems to be popular nationwide, why would we or would we not want to use some of the national pieces. We had a couple that we were really excited about, but then realized that the level would not meet the diverse needs of our students. They were too specific one was actually an AP one that we found out later, unfortunately. It was just, the rigor was too high without the scope in it. And then we sent all of the ones that we initially, once we looked at them and compared them, I think it was 5, and don't quote me on that, I can't quite remember, different ones that we sent through the rubric tool that's in the district policy for resources, and scored them. And all of the teachers that wanted to volunteer to do that taught 9th and 10th grade sciences were asked to do that if they would like. And so we tabulated that and came to some conclusions on which ones would we like to try to pilot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Monica.
So just a follow-up in the comment that Jerry had about that there is not enough to give a book to a teacher to have that. Maybe a question for you or for Willie is about, we just went to the strategic plan. I guess I'm excited about the results that I have been hearing. But part of the results in the strategic planning had to do with teachers mentoring each other and how that works together, and I wonder if you could please give us a little bit more of a background on that part. Or maybe Johnny.
And I'll take that question. Our strategic plan, it's a real simple statement for me. Our strategic plan is basically the basis for all of our decisions or movements or things that we do operationally. And so the question you're asking, when we were there the other day during strategic planning, the presentation that you saw today is a product of that strategic plan. You're talking about, within our strategic plan, it talks about professional development and also talks about strategic alignment. And here's an example of the strategic plan and how it benefits our district.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we have a motion and a second for the adoption of Glencoe Physical Science Grade 9 and Glencoe Biology Grade 10 materials. Mr. Mose, would you take roll?
Jerry Von Korf.
Yes.
Monica Segura-Schwartz.
Yes.
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Jeff Pulreese.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Next on the agenda is another action item. It's the approval of the name for the new high school. Joni Olson.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, members of the board. I'm here tonight to talk with you about the naming committee and process for the new high school, as well as to bring forward the name for your review and consideration. First of all, the work of the naming committee began about a month or so ago and was guided by Board Policy 899 with similar guidelines that were utilized for naming of the Quarry View Early Childhood Center. The committee composition was determined by the board policy, and all of the guidelines were utilized in that work. Before you, you'll see the membership of that committee, and again, that composition was determined by the policy. We had teaching staff from Tech High School, 2 representatives who served as both alumni and business community members, Tech High School principal, a representative from the city of St. Cloud, a parent, actually 2 parents, our local historian Bill Morgan, and Carly Ruck, who was our student representative. And I served as facilitator for that work, not as a working member of that committee or the process itself. The naming committee began its discussion by talking about things of historical significance for the high school, local geographic features, and the aspects of honoring the tradition of the existing high school. So really good, healthy conversation about what we wished to signify in a name for a new high school. The process began by brainstorming all of the names that the committee members felt met the criteria that we discussed, that honoring tradition, geographic features, historical significance in the area. And that brainstorming resulted in 13 names that we had discussion around. The group narrowed the names by some general consensus in eliminating some proper names from the list. The group went on to do a nominal group distribution process in which all committee members received a series of dots and could use the dots to determine one name that they wanted to weight more highly or to distribute their dots across several favorite names. From that process, the list was narrowed to a top 5, and there was a clear dividing point between the lower ranked names and the top 5. From there, the group went on to have conversation around the top 5 names as they were listed and to concur and gain consensus around the ranking order of those names. The names in their order of rank were St. Cloud Tech High School, St. Cloud Technical High School, St. Cloud Granite Creek High School, St. Cloud Technological High School, and St. Cloud Neenah Creek High School. By consensus, the group chose to consider St. Cloud Tech High School as the official name for external naming and to be known internally as Tech High School. Do you have any questions this evening?
Bruce?
Mr. Chair, could I make a motion, or do I?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to move the adoption of the name St. Cloud Tech High School for our new high school.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I have some.
Jeff?
I just want to kind of say that I won't be supporting choice number one, no disrespect to the committee, but if changing Tech High School's name to St.Cloud Tech, my reasons for this, it's going to cost unnecessary money to be spent. You're potentially going to lose over 100 years of continued history. And if the main reason that I heard at the board, the last meeting, was because everyone already calls it St. Cloud Tech, that's not a good enough reason for me. They're going to continue to be known as Tech, whether you change the name or not. If you do an internet search for St. Cloud Tech, it always comes up St. Cloud Technical Vocational College. So, I mean, that's not going to avoid that confusion. I'm going to support number two because I just don't want to take a chance with that history, and I think it's unnecessary money being spent, but that's just my opinion.
Shannon?
So if it was so it was no longer the word technical and it was just tech, where does that trickle down to undoing or deleting those few letters to shorten it up to tech? What does that affect? Can anybody answer that? You know, is it website? Is it letterhead paper? How far does that go? Is it a big deal? I don't know.
Bruce?
Well, I would respond to that. I really couldn't say that I know the answer to that, except we have to reprint letterhead on somewhat of a regular basis, I would assume. And so I don't see where that expense would be something that would be changing the name when you reprint or when you print more letterhead is a pretty minor thing. You have to change the name of the building principal on that letterhead occasionally also, and all of those kinds of things. I don't understand what the big expense would be, and as a graduate and longtime teacher, coach, and administrator at Tech, I think it more accurately reflects what the community has always thought the school was, and that is Tech High School. And you never hear anybody refer to Technical High School in the St. Cloud community. And even as we have discussed in state tournaments, which Tech fairly regularly participates, when you see the designation of the name on the brackets, it's always St. Cloud Tech. So to me, I think it just reaffirms what the community has for many, many years referred to the school as, and moves away from the formal name for which it was when it began a technical school, one of the first schools in Minnesota that incorporated technical vocational training into the program. It's no longer that, what do I want to say, limited or specific of a educational program. It's a more comprehensive program, but the name Tech is ingrained enough across the state of Minnesota, and certainly in the traditions of the school, to get my support for the name recommendation.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, any materials like envelopes and letterhead and stuff, you're going to have to get new anyway because the address is changing. So it's not going to, really, it's going to be the same expense there. As far as the name of the high school is concerned, I believe there's 2 brick pylons on each corner of the high school property right now that say Tech High School, not Technical High School. Each corner of the property, you're looking a little confused, but each corner has a brick freestanding sign and it says Tech High School. And I looked at that after the last meeting when I went over to Tech for some purpose. I was over there. There was the Distinguished Alumni meeting. When I drove past there, I looked and I thought, wow, we should try to move those now that the name is going to be Tech High School, because if we could save those and we'll have 2 entrances and they'll work perfectly. So I don't know why we would want to save the name Technical. I don't know where that really even exists, except officially.
There are things in education that I'm willing to fight for and think that one is definitely better than the other. I think there's a dang good argument for St. Cloud Technical High School. I think there's a dang good argument for Tech here, but this is the recommendation that comes to us through a process. There were alumni involved. We publicized this. There hasn't been this groundswell of people like there were for Clark Field or for a variety of other things that were when something is important to people in the community about tech or technical high school, they let us know. And I really think the fact that we have not heard tells us that people are at peace with this name, and I'm going to support the recommendation, even though if they'd come back with Technical High School, I would have supported that recommendation as well.
Bruce Mose?
Thank you, Mr. Dahlgren. And I respect and Member Pulreis's reflection and his position. I just want to mention also, though, as a member of the Tech High School Alumni Association, that in all of our correspondence, in all of our doings over the years, and being a member of that board, Tech High School is the commonly used, and for 75 years of its 100 years existence has been known as Tech High School. And I'm very respectful of the process that's brought us this name, and I'm imagining that if we could poll all 30,000 plus graduates of Tech High School since 1916, first of all, many of them we couldn't poll, but those that are remaining, there would be just a unanimous consensus amongst that population of people for Tech High School. The Tech Centennial celebration this summer just again reflects and renews the common usage of that name, Tech High School, and for the reason of this being brought forth by a naming process, I'm supporting in my vote this evening Tech High School.
Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Mose, would you call roll?
Bruce Henches.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes. L. Dahlgren.
Yes.
Jerry Von Korf.
Yes.
Monica Segura Schwartz.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Jeff Pulreis.
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you. Next, we have a discussion item. It's Board Policy Review, second reading, Section 100. Joni Olson, Executive Director of Student Achievement and Strategic Alignment.
Are there any questions about the policies that we're bringing forward? As you'll notice, we did decide that we would be doing some further work on the complaint policy that we talked about last time. and the others remain as they were at the last reading.
This is a discussion item, so we don't need a motion. Is there any discussion? Does anyone have any questions? These policies were reviewed in detail at the work session, which we had just a couple of weeks ago. So any questions right now would be in addition to anything that wasn't answered or that was answered at the work session. Seeing no further questions, second reading is completed. Those will come back for the third and final reading at the board meeting before our May workshop. Next is another action item. It's a resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of teaching contracts of named probationary teachers. Tracy Flynn Bowe.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, Superintendent Jett, board members. As we continue our staffing process, and as we discussed at the last board meeting, we have a resolution tonight relating to the non-renewal of probationary teachers to continue that process. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution.
So I introduced the resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contract of named probation teacher. So whereas Cassandra Michelle is a probationary teacher employed by Independent School District 742, be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 742 that the probationary teaching contract for named probationary teachers are hereby terminated effective at the close of 2016-2017 school year pursuant to Minnesota Statute 122A.40, subsection 5. Be it further resolved that written notice be sent to teachers regarding the termination and non-renewal of his or her probationary teaching contract as provided by law, and that said notice shall be in substantially the following form.
Thank you. I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Jerry? Monica and Jerry, motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Bruce Mose, would you call roll?
Monica Segudo-Schwartz.
Yes.
Jerry Van Korf.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Jeff Polreese.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Bruce Hentges.
Yes.
Bruce Mose, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we move into the superintendent's report. Mr. Willie Jett.
Good evening, Chair Dahlgren, members of the board. Before I begin my superintendent's report, I wanted to look out in the audience, and there's a young lady out there by the name of Marusha. And so she's looking up, and I know that she's getting ready to leave. But I just wanted to give a quick shout out because we've been all paying attention and marveling at your patience as you are sitting here as a young person during this meeting. So I wanted to also commend Mom, Jerusha, in terms of watching her behavior and just paying a little attention. It's something to marvel at. So thank you for being here. Congratulations to the Tech High School Skills USA team, who at the state competition had 6 state champions, 2 runner-ups, and 2 bronze medalists. Second, Alex Pashan, an Apollo Automotive student, is heading to New York to compete in the National Automotive Technology Competition. The National Automotive Technology Competition is a test of skill, a measure of knowledge, and a race against the clock, all rolled into one. It features the nation's best high school automotive education students from across the country competing for the title of the nation's best automotive technician. So good luck, Alex. This one here I'm smiling at because I'm saying, okay, who put this one here? Apollo football coach Justin Scalarud was awarded the Community Service Award for 2017 from the Minnesota Football Coaches Association. And this award is given to one high school football coach annually. The award goes to a program that goes above and beyond in giving back to their community. And I made that quick comment because his wife is sitting here. But if anybody has watched Coach Scalarud, and I've been here 4 years, if you've watched what he does in the community with young people, this award is long overdue. He does an outstanding job as it relates to community service, getting young kids all the way from kindergarten up to buy in and be part of things, and then to watch his high school kids give back to the community. It's something to see. North Junior High is proud to share that Their junior CMPS, that's Community Problem Solvers team, with the support of the St. Cloud Mayor, Mr. Dave Kleiss, and the St. Cloud City Council members, celebrated Choose Your Path Day on April 4th in honor of their project about reducing violent crime in St. Cloud. The team spoke with Mayor Kleiss on his WJON radio show, and they were also highlighted on his Twitter account with a short video filmed outside of North Junior High. Next, it's been quite a winter sports season with many of our Apollo and Tech teams heading into the Minnesota State tournaments. Each year, the St. Cloud Times names outstanding athletes from the Central Lakes Conference to the all-area teams for each sport. So congratulations to the 18 students from Tech and Apollo for being named to the all-area teams. Next, the Tech Alumni Association inducted 10 alumni to the Hall of Fame on Thursday, April 13th to help celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the dedication of Tech High School. Mayor Dave Kleiss proclaimed April 13th, 2017, Tech Hall of Fame Day and Tech High School Rededication Day. The inductees were honored for their success in their careers and for their service to the community. And one of our own is sitting here this evening, was honored on that day, Mr. Bruce Henches. Next, it's our National Volunteer Appreciation Week. District 742 would like to give a huge shout out and thank you to all the volunteers that contribute their time, energy, passion, and knowledge to our students. Volunteers contributed over 75,000 hours of their time to support our schools and students this last school year. So just like to say thank you. Staff, if something that just happened, if you were paying attention on the websites, staff and community volunteers built an adaptive playground at Talahi Community School last Saturday. Longtime Talahi volunteer, Grandpa John Bowden, along with other community donors, including local Lions clubs and Lions International Foundation, raised a total of $250,000 for the playground that is designed for accessibility for all children. It features ADA equipment and a ramp. And yesterday, the ceremonial groundbreaking for St. Cloud Area School District 742's Quarry View Education Center was held yesterday afternoon. Board members, Waite Park City Councilmen, along with district representatives, posed for the first official dig at the new site. And it was an eventful moment, even though some of us, our teeth were chattering. And lastly, Quarry View will house the district's early childhood and community education programs. The facility is expected to open in the summer of 2018. And that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you. Next, we have the Board Development Policy and Governance, Shannon Haas.
The Board Development Policy and Governance Committee has met twice since our last Thursday board meeting. We met on March 28th, where we reviewed Section 100 of the policies. And on April 26th, we met again and we reviewed Section 900s, as well as 503 and 417, which were student attendance and chemical use and abuse. These will be presented at our next workshop in May. And at both meetings, we also discussed board development workshop with key works as we continue to look at how we can implement that in this fall. Thank you.
And we were also promised that for sure this month we will be reviewing the discipline policy to bring forward at the next, it would be not at the May workshop, but at the June workshop. So I'm looking forward to that one. Next up would be the Community Linkages Committee, Bruce Mose.
Mr. Chair, the Community Linkages Committee did not meet on its regularly scheduled Thursday, April 13th day. We will meet, our next meeting is May 11th, and we will, at our linkage presentation, we will be presented by Sam Court of our school district, and he will present on the SOUP concept in the community. But we did have a couple of engagement activities that were attended, and I'd like to ask Jeff Polreese if he would just give us a brief report on the April 6th community safety event at North Junior High. Jeff.
For that event, it was called Safety Inside and Out. It was April 6th, 7 p.m. North Junior High. Originally, we had Patty Wetterling scheduled to come, but for some reason she had to back out. In her place was Allison Fay. She's a member of the Justice Wetterling Resource Center. She's also a classmate of Jacob back in the day. She did a bang-up job, great speaker, it was phenomenal. Second up on the agenda was a lady from Gold Cross. She did a presentation on Heimlich maneuver and CPR. She actually had some of the North Junior High students get up and help with the CPR experience. That was cool. We also received a presentation from a young lady with the St. Cloud Police Department School Liaison Officers. Very good, informative. That one was about internet safety, what some of our kids do and don't do on the internet, and I was somewhat tech savvy, but I was blown away. I didn't know how much was out there. It was a first-time event. I'll be totally honest with you, it was sparsely attended. We did have a little brainstorming afterwards, tried to learn from that so we can maybe build on the future, hopefully for a higher attendance. An event that I'm going to be doing, and I've sent out emails to some of the board members for a future linkage event for this coming month, is I've invited 100 fifth graders from Madison Elementary over for a tour of the jail, 911, the courthouse, dispatch, that kind of thing. So if you haven't got the invite, that's a welcome. You just got it from me. Please attend if you want. It's a very cool learning experience, and it gives the kids one more profession to look forward to if they want to become a lawyer, correction, police officer. It's a nice segue to that. So that's my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Also on April 6th, there was the Greater St. Cloud Talent Summit. Shannon, you attended that. Would you just give us a little brief on that?
Sure. One of the breakout sessions that I attended was engaging high school employment, and there was a presentation being put on surrounding Hutchinson High School, and they're designing their curriculum and schedule around meeting the needs. It's very similar to what Alexandria High School is doing, and last week we were visiting up there and seeing not only the new building, but learning more about what they have going on in Alexandria. So Hutchinson has its own version of this that has been designed with their unique community and how they're working on creating a high school to build employable adults.
Thank you, Shannon. Also, I would report in our engagement events, reminding us and just going back and reflecting on the Partners in Education event, April 17th. That is a very, very much an engagement with the community in which we honored many persons for their volunteer activities. It's one of the great events in our school district every year, and we're always happy to acknowledge that. As I said, number one on the runway in terms of our linkage presentations will be Sam Court on the SOUP event. Also coming up are the SCSU Confucius Institute Winter Camp with Madison Chinese immersion students. There will be a presentation on that. Also the St. Cloud State University AAUW STEM project, Technology Savvy Day. Karen Bankston and Melissa Hanzik-Brill will be making presentations. And also on the Math Smart project, SMART project, Teaching Mathematics Through the Arts, Jane Oxton and Melissa Hanzik-Brill are going to be making that presentation. So we will have some busy items coming up on our linkage presentations, and the committee is always brainstorming on the next engagement activity. Our next meeting is Thursday, May 11th, 7:30 a.m. at the DAO. Mr. Chair, that's our report.
Thank you. Next would be Finance and Audit. Jeff Polrice.
Finance and Audit met on the 24th, 7:30 at Apollo. In attendance was Superintendent Jett, Interim Executive Director Amy Scalaru, Gary Ganji, board members Bruce Henches, Jerry Von Korf, myself, and a community member, Scott Andreasen. There was a discussion of the need to move back the timeline for the board to approve the budget from May to June, and that is due to recent staff changes. The district will still meet the July 1st statutory deadline. Because of this, the finance study group scheduled for May will be rescheduled for June. It was also mentioned that both the Executive Director of Business Services and Director of Buildings and Grounds positions have been posted and will close on May 4th. Amy Skullerud presented a brief overview of how the funding works for both long-term facilities maintenance and levy funds. There was also a discussion about when and if we should bring the levy question for Apollo back to the voters. The meeting ended at about 9:15.
Thank you, Jeff. Next is Legislative Committee. Whoops, Monica.
So in the question about the bringing the lobby question to voters, so I understand why the Legislative Committee is discussing on that because it has to do with funding, but what would be the next step about that so they discuss it in the committee and then after that what happened, that when would have, they will be bringing it to the board for further discussion, or how do we give input or not about that?
It was a discussion, and we were discussing the pros and cons of the when and the where. We were also discussing the importance of and the need of, and how that is at the forefront, and it's it is an immediate need for our north side. In terms of next steps, I'm sure we will continue that discussion in board finance. We will, as the superintendent, I'm also having that conversation out in the community with business leaders and parent groups. And so as we're gathering all that information, then we would bring that back to the board with a recommendation.
I guess part of my question is, if I am interested in that conversation, should I just attend to finance meetings or what?
Well, I can kind of answer that, and that if you went to the finance committees, you wouldn't be able to speak because we can only have 3 members on a committee. You'd be the 4th person, which would create a quorum, which we can't do. So no. If you're interested in it, nothing discussed in a committee can be decided without coming to the board first. So oftentimes things will start in a committee and then they'll come to the board. But you would not be able to go to the committee and participate in the discussion.
Mr. Chair, I did want to mention that there are non-board members involved in tech support, Apollo support, who are interested in this question, and so nothing stops a board member from, contacting the folks that are doing that.
Mr. Chair, wouldn't it also be appropriate for any board member who has concern about a topic that a committee is discussing to approach the committee chair with their ideas to be expressed at the meeting?
Well, absolutely. You can talk to any board member before. I mean, the question Monica asked was, should she attend the meeting?
Right.
And that,
so I'm just suggesting really something
no,
other than attending the meeting.
Yes, anytime before a committee. But the thing is, we don't all see the agendas for each of the committees. The agenda doesn't necessarily go to all board members. But if you do have a question or interest in a certain topic, yes, you can talk to the committee chair. You can talk to any other board member about that. You can talk to the board chair. You can talk to the superintendent. There's a whole bunch of ways that you can express your ideas and concerns. But we can't create many quorums around the district and have discussions. That's my point.
Legislative committee? Okay.
Legislative Committee.
Okay, Mr. Chair and board members, I've passed out the meeting minutes from our April 11th Board Legislative Committee meeting. It was attended by board members Haas, Paul Rice, and Peter Hammerlich as the community representative. And maybe just a couple of comments on the first topic, the preschool tour. At our last regular board meeting here, we had said that we were lining up a tour with the commissioner and our local legislators, and we did that, and in fact even invited the governor, and the lieutenant governor was going to be coming along. But unfortunately, on the April 12th date, or before that, the lieutenant governor developed a conflict in her schedule, and so it was rescheduled and then postponed. And we're in the process of trying to reschedule that visit by the Commissioner of Education and the Lieutenant Governor, as well as our local legislators of our preschool, voluntary preschool program and our EL preschool pilot program that we have right now. And it's kind of important because, as we've discussed before, the preschool program itself, the voluntary preschool program, is in jeopardy right now in the state legislature. The next topic we discussed was the Legislative Conference Committee and the Omnibus Education legislation. The Education Conference Committee held its first two meetings on April 19th and 20th last week. I did attend both meetings. In those meetings, I had the opportunity to listen to the review of all 12 articles of the Omnibus Education bill. And the good news was that in the House education proposal, there is $1 million for the Santa Foundation. And of course, our Dreamline program here in District 742 is offered through the Santa Foundation. And maybe even more significantly, there's an increase in transportation, school transportation, that is part of the House proposal that would mean about a $333,000 increase for District 742. But unfortunately, that's about all of the good news out of the conference committee. As I shared with the board at our work session last Wednesday or a couple Wednesdays ago, there is some real differences between the governor's proposal and targets for education, totaling over $700 million, and the House and the Senate's proposals for education. And we discussed those as a committee. We also went through the fiscal analysis, the detail that is given to the House and the Senate at the conference committee. And I've got a copy of that fiscal analysis if anybody would like it, but it allowed us to go in detail through the proposals that are before the House, Senate, and the governor's proposal. And by the way, Commissioner Casilius did testify at the conference committee hearing and really challenged the legislators to increase the targets for education that she felt are woefully lacking. Anyway, as a result of our discussion, I was assigned to draft a letter to be sent to each of the conference committee members explaining our concerns with the proposals that are out there and asking for an increase in the education target. I did do that. It was signed off by all committee members. It was shared with Superintendent Jett and Chair Dahlgren before it was sent. We also copied it to the commissioner as well as to our own legislators so that they know our concerns and that we have expressed those to the conference committee. The focus of our letter, and by the way, for those who had not seen it, I have copies of the letter if anybody would like one, but our focus was that we're deeply concerned about the funding targets for both the House and the Senate education bills. We have asked particularly for support of the governor's position regarding special education, which is a $45 million increase, whereas neither the House or the Senate has any extra funding, increase in funding for special education. And we've asked for support of the voluntary pre-K program that the governor has championed. We're also concerned about delinking of compensatory funding from the formula and how that would impact District 742. And finally, about funding for the Department of Education so that they can do their job adequately also. So I've got the letters if anybody would like to see them. It appears that that it's likely that the legislature will pass the omnibus education bills and the governor will not sign them, and in which case they will need to come back and I guess go through negotiations again in order to try to get an education bill that is acceptable to the governor. When that happens, party leadership, which includes our own Representative Jim Knobloch as chair of the Ways and Means Committee, will be very key towards that, are involved in that negotiations, and we have stayed in close contact with him and are making sure that he is aware of our concerns as this moves forward. So, unless other committee members would have anything to add, that would be our report.
Any questions? If not, then next would be the Personnel and Negotiations Committee, Monica Segura-Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We haven't met since the work session, so we have the same report that we had at the work session.
Thank you. Then the Integration and Equity and Education Committee, Jerry Von Korf.
You have a fairly long written report in front of you. We met on Wednesday, Mr. Henches and Monica Segura-Schwartz and myself without staff because the staff was elsewhere occupied. But this about 10 years ago, under the leadership of Deb Lally, the board took a look at our governance model, and out of that work came the key works that your committee is looking at. One of the key works is a product of the National School Boards Association, which is a sort of Baldrige-oriented excellence model that differs from some of the models that are being used in Minnesota. But one of the things they put in our hands was the 8 characteristics of effective school districts, something that they really believe in, and that document comes from a study of effective, of what is going on in school boards where student achievement is gaining. And one of the points that this study made was that effective school boards are data savvy. They embrace and monitor data even when the information is negative and use it to drive continuous improvement. The Lighthouse study showed that board members in high-achieving districts identified specific needs through data and justified decisions based on that data. At this month's committee meeting, we continued a discussion that had been ongoing last year under Dr. Green's leadership to look at how the district uses data internally as we, the board, look at school and district performance and how we report that to the public. And I want to emphasize that the public aspect is important, but it's also important that we think about how we use data and how we understand it. We had a robust discussion for an hour and a half, and we didn't all agree on everything. But I've put some things in that the committee discussed, and I'm really hoping that there'll be a method by which board members can look at and get a sense of what's going on in the committee, because really we're working for the board and with the superintendent. Over the last year plus, the ad hoc committee, and now hopefully the Achievement, Integration, and Equity Committee has worked collaboratively with the executive leadership of the district, and we've through that process, I think, come to a number of conclusions, but those conclusions have not been adopted by the board. They aren't really in writing anywhere, and so if you weren't involved in that process, how do you know what the results were, and do you agree with them? And I think it's really, really important that we have an opportunity to get something in writing so that we understand what it is that we believe about data. The example that I've given in the report you may have seen before, but it arises from a discussion that we had at the time that the North Junior High presentation was made. And that presentation aggregated student performance, that is, averaged it all together, and the average made it look as though North was doing about 16 points behind the state average. But in fact, that number is not a valid representation of any group at North. In fact, most of the groups at North are doing very close or equal to the state average, but the difference in the percentages of the groups, when you average them together, you get a picture that, in my opinion, is simply not accurate at what teachers are doing or what students are doing. And the dialogue that I think that we need to have is how do we make sure that when that the data that we share with the public, but also the data that we use to evaluate ourselves, shows where we're doing well and also shows where we're not doing so well in a way that's statistically valid. And there's different people have different points of view on that. So it involves a consensus building and dialogue process, and hopefully that process will move forward. Two of us on the committee feel that we definitely need a written policy that has some principles in it about aggregation and disaggregation, and Monica's still working with us to get the information that she needs to decide. But it's been a tremendous asset to the discussion and challenged the other two of us. So that would be my report. I do feel that this is not going to work unless we've had great cooperation from the executive leadership, but I think there has to also be a process by which the whole board eventually is involved and gets an opportunity to be part of this discussion.
Monica?
Thank you, Jerry, for the briefing. I wanted to add some of my concerns, so I wanted to bring forward some of my concerns about our discussion. One of the points that Mr. Jerry Van Korf brings up is when he says that there is not a accurate representation of North in the example that he's providing. I think that is a matter of opinion yet to figure out what means accurate representation. So I think that is a point of discussion that we continue to discuss. The other part of it is that one of our concerns that was part of our discussion was to discuss what scores mean and how we define success within our schools, and I think that is the main concern. We wanted to, or I wanted to have a broader representation of what success means. And I wanted to point as an example the presentation that we had today within McKinley school where success within the school was defined a little different than what we were looking at within the presentation. So I wanted to add that some of my concerns for a policy or defining policy right now will be about how we are defining success within the schools and what will be a more comprehensive representation of that, and wanted to understand that better. The other concern that I had is that by defining a policy that tells the district how to explain further the data, I am concerned that we may be falling into procedures instead of policy, so that will define a procedure instead of defining a policy, which will be out of the scope of the board.
Bruce?
I think Monica just kind of said what I was going to say as a follow-up. I think that clearly we need to look at broader data than test scores in determining, as a board, if the educational opportunities that we are providing for kids are quality opportunities. And I was thinking the same thing as Principal Johnson was talking today. There was not one test score mentioned, yet Mr. Mose wants to leave the board and go teach for Mr. Johnson, and others of us in here were moved by his passion for education and what he's doing with kids. Somehow we have to be able to measure all of that and to try to move away, I think, from categorizing groups of kids and overemphasizing standardized test scores. The state wants to do that, and the state's going to do that once a year. Let them, if that's what they want to do. But I think that we can perhaps, by looking at this as a board, come up with a better set of qualities that we're looking for that can excite people to attend District 742 schools because of the quality educational experience that they will get. And I know there's a lot more that we need to talk about, but I just needed to say that.
Jerry?
Well, this effort is not an effort to undermine the acknowledgement of these other important things. Basically, when the presentations come to us, there's a part of the presentations that present these very important soft things that are important for kids and how they feel about themselves and so on. And then there's another part of the presentation, and it's the presentation where we get the standardized test score results. And there are a huge number of people in our community for whom those numbers are important. There's no way in the world that you can say to people, well, the newspaper's going to report this and it's going to be on the website, and then those numbers get translated onto, if you go on the web and if you're a parent and you're looking for what schools are, how they're doing, those numbers are retranslated into social media. And if you look at the numbers that we use against ourselves, those numbers do show schools that are making remarkable success on standardized test scores as if they are way behind other schools. And I think that's a huge problem in this district. I know that when teachers see that data reported at board meetings and in the newspaper, it harms morale. They say, our students are progressing. On their standardized test scores, they are progressing. And the standardized test scores tell us how well they can read. And while there are all these other important things, how well they can read is something that's hugely important to the people in this community. And when we understate the progress that they're making, understate by sometimes 20 points the progress that they're making in schools, and then other people say, well, District 742 is failing, I'm not saying that's the only important thing in the world, but it is harmful to the district. It's humiliating to the students who go to that school.
Point of order. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Chair, it seems like Mr. Vankorf is illustrating his opinion about the discussion and going away from the report.
Well, I'm just about done, but this is an important issue for this district, and people do have strong opinions about it, and I think this wasn't supposed to be the place to discuss it, but I didn't, I gave the report as best I could. I'm passing the mic back to the chair.
Yeah, I don't quite understand the comment there. I'm not a chair who pulls people back from having an opinion. I pretty much let people express opinions freely while sitting in this chair. So I certainly wasn't going to cut you off, Jerry. Is there any other discussion on this report? I guess I have a couple of questions. I saw in the written report, it says, as chair, I'd like to take the following steps. It says, I'd like feedback from the board on whether the board wants us to move forward in partnership with the district leadership to reform the way we report student performance and data. And then it says, I'd like to continue a dialogue with the district leadership, which I would assume is going to happen through committee. The third point was I'd like to find a forum where we could have a discussion on what we really want to monitor and when we would receive school data. Are you asking there, Jerry, to bring this forward in a workshop type setting?
I was more asking that people give thought about this, all of these issues, because this can't be two of our decisions or three of our decisions, and the superintendent has a ton of to say about this, and is really important in this process. But I wanted people to have a sense of the issues and to give some thought on how we might go about dealing with them.
I think at some point we'll have to have a workshop meeting set up on this where the full board can participate.
Mr. Chair, that's one of the things I was just going to say, is that this is such a complex, as you could tell by just the exchange that we've had here, an important topic for us, that I think it might make a great retreat topic for us to spend a day talking to each other about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that it's a really difficult one, and I know it's difficult for it's difficult for us to understand. It's difficult for the public to understand. I've watched with a ton of interest the comments. If you follow the St. Cloud Times articles on Stride Academy, in the Facebook version, not the online version of the St. Cloud Times, you'll find many, many, many comments from parents about Stride Academy. The online version, for some reason, doesn't get a whole lot of comments. You usually get about 3-4 comments. But if you go to the Facebook posted articles, you get a long string of comments. And it's very interesting there, where you have a school that's closing for very similar things to what we see in our district, where scores tend to be reported much lower than what's actually happening with the individual students. The parents who have kids at Stride really understand what's going on. They've been taught and told what's going on there. Yet, when they, for some reason, when they talk about Stride and how great of a school it's been for their child and how wonderful they love Stride, they just don't understand why this is happening to them, and then they go into this because we don't want to send our kids to the St. Cloud schools where they're just so much worse, and look at their test scores, and look at and it's like, it's the same scenario. We have kids that are performing at extremely high levels. We have groups of children who have seen remarkable increases in test scores and performance over the last several years, and it's being somewhat diminished or diluted in the reporting or the way that we report it out to the community. And I think it's really unfortunate that that happens, because there's really good things going on in the schools. And I agree with Jerry that we've got to be able to tell that story. We have to be able to show what's going on in there. And I also agree with you, Bruce, that it's, you know, we shouldn't, there are a whole lot of factors that go into the school experience for children and what they're learning. And as Al was talking earlier tonight, he wasn't talking about what they're learning from a GPA standpoint. He was talking about what they're learning about life and life skills and just being able to survive in society and be productive members, and how proud he was of the fact that they had kids that they were able to take traumatized kids and build them into productive contributors to society. So there are a whole lot of things, and it's a very, very complex subject, but we're really, unfortunately, we are one of the districts that's on the more difficult side of that equation. Yes, Jerry, and then Monica.
10 years ago, my neighborhood school was experiencing declining test scores. And people in the neighborhood knew that. It bothered them. And one of the things that the folks were saying at that time at that school was, our kids have special problems, they have special issues, they're high, free, and reduced lunch, they're working really hard. We're doing the best we can. And a new principal came in, a new superintendent came in. They said something completely different. They said, we can make dramatic improvements in the number of kids that are reading proficiently, and over the last 4 years, the test scores at that school have gone, as a measure of how many kids in that school are reading at a proficient level, have gone up dramatically. If we didn't monitor those test scores, we wouldn't have a clue. We'd be saying, oh, they're doing great things, they're supporting those kids and all of that, but we wouldn't have a clue that the things that the superintendent and the principal and the teachers have done have been paying huge dividends. I don't say that's the only important thing that's going on in my neighborhood school. Of course it's not. You know, it's whether, but it's a window on what's happening. That's all I'm saying.
As the discussion progressed, I wanted to go back to my initial concern when I was looking for a point of order. So in explanation to you, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I think that we need to have our session to discuss this. And I have also opinions that I can bring up here, and we will probably stay here until 12 or later discussing this topic. I'm just saying, I'm just referring to, is this, I guess I have a question for you, is this the appropriate moment to be discussing this at extent, or what do we need to do to bring it back to the board?
I don't know if it's the appropriate time or if it was the intent of Mr. Van Korff for us to go into a long discussion based on this board report. I know that he was looking to get some feedback, and I think that probably the proper decision is that we would move towards planning a workshop or an off-site board retreat for a day where we could discuss this, and maybe sooner better than later. I guess I would look for some feedback from the committee, from the Education Committee, to tell us when, if you want that, like June, July, August, when are you thinking on something like that? And then on board development, we could schedule a off-site board retreat day where we could have this discussion. So I guess that's what I would say to that. No, I don't think that this is the appropriate time. It wasn't on the agenda for a discussion tonight, but sometimes things evolve. But I do also believe, though, Monica, that we have to let people finish their thoughts, even if we're not necessarily comfortable with what's being said. So,
my apologies about that, but I could have also responses about that, and I just did what I thought that was appropriate at the moment.
is there any more discussion on the Education Committee? Shannon?
Regarding social media, I can see that out there, and I think if you look at social media and what is being said about St. Cloud's test scores, it's supporting Jerry and saying that people are aware in this community of the test scores that are being reported. So people are talking about it, and the only thing they know is what's being reported. So if something else was being reported, a more accurate examination of our test scores and the great things that are going on in this district, it would be very beneficial to give us the truly deserved reputation we have for the quality education.
Thank you. Any other? If not, then we are going to move on to, I lost my sheet. The future agenda items, and we're looking at, I guess we are looking here at the agenda items that would appear in our next workshop meeting in May. And we will be looking at a new high school update. We'll be looking at section 900 board policies for the first reading. And we'll be looking at a revised policy 503 and a new policy 417. Is there any, yep, Mr. Jett.
I would like to correct on something. I would like to alter something. It's a new high school update, and we've always been careful to say it's the new high school update, but this evening I think we voted to say that it has a different name, that it's Tech High School. So I just would like to refer to it like that.
The new Tech.
The new Tech.
Point taken. If there is nothing else, the meeting will be adjourned.